This podcast was created within the framework of Erasmus Plus Youth Exchange per Aspera and Inferi, Unveiling the Roots of Drug Addiction Among Youth, financed by the European Union. In today's episode, we will dive deep into the intricate web of drug addiction among today's youth. This is Silesian Society for Solidarity, and we're thrilled to be your guide on this thought-provoking journey. In a world where the allure of substances can be overwhelming, it's crucial that we confront the underlying causes of addiction head-on. But let's wait for a while and let us ask you, how many cups of coffee did you have today already? 1 or 2? Maybe you're drinking one right now as well. There are people who need over 7 cups a day. After all, caffeine is an addictive substance to many. Nevertheless, luckily, its consumption doesn't bring many disastrous consequences compared to other illegal substances. But just imagine it did. It's much faster and easier to fall victim to an addiction, much easier than many of us would think, and especially for youngsters whose prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, life goals, and individual value system, is still biologically immature and might be very negatively affected by many of these substances, just like the subsequent individual growth. We, together with our participants of our youth exchange, believe that understanding the roots of addiction is essential for prevention, intervention, and ultimately fostering a healthier future for our youth. Together, we'll navigate through the shadows, uncovering the factors that contribute to substance abuse while seeking solutions to break this vicious cycle. Throughout this podcast, we will explore various aspects of addiction among young individuals, delving into the biological, psychological, and social factors at play. We'll analyze the situation concerning drug addiction in various countries like Czech Republic, Afghanistan, or South Sudan, and thanks to our comparative approach, we will try to explain the historical factors which had influence on consumption of different addictive substances by different societies in different historical periods. Together, during our project, we tried to shatter the stigma surrounding youngsters fighting addiction as well as to foster empathy and mutual understanding. But right now, let us listen to one of the presentations prepared by our participants during the project. Alcohol, basically, we have a very, very long tradition of this. The residues of alcoholic beverages date really from 7,000 years before Christ, so it's really, really old. Very ancient societies, Egypt, etc., knew how to make beer, etc. Well, but there were some differences. For example, in the ancient Greece, they were drinking mostly very diluted wine. There were even many texts written about the barbarians, like, Thracians and Phrygians and other people who were living at the time of the ancient Greece. Also Macedonians, who were like Greeks but a bit barbaric, let's say. And one of the way how you differentiated between a barbaric person and a Greek one, ancient Greek one, at the time was the habits of drinking. They were saying that they had this kind of conception that if you were drinking undiluted wine, undiluted with water or anything else, then you will very probably commit suicide or act as a fool, as a crazy person, etc. Because the wine that they were drinking was mostly much less powerful, much less strong than the wine that we are drinking today. By the ancient Greek standards, we would be all considered as barbarians, as we are drinking mostly like not diluted wine. So yes, they had like pretty negative opinion, many of the ancient Greeks except for Macedonians, about this thing. So it's interesting.
Also in the, yes?
Maybe there was like some kind of like story or something, like why did they start drinking diluted wine?
Why they started? Well, because it's like you don't want to have these effects. Like we want to have the effects of normal alcohol, and you can still work. Like if you will just drink normal alcohol, it's hard to work on the field and stuff and do some, really tough work. Whereas alcohol, you can drink it. Also, that's the reason why in the medieval ages, people were usually not drinking water too much. They were drinking beer. But also the beer, they could even consume like 2-3 liters of beer per day. But the beer wasn't strong at all. Like in comparison to today's beer, it was nothing. It was like very, very like, it had a very low dosage of alcohol. So the normal peasant could still work in the arable lands, and he wouldn't pass out of alcohol, etc. Without him, without it having effect on his work. On the other hand, though, well, we know the farmers, etc., the serfs, needed to work on the field. They needed to be productive, because if they weren't, they would just starve. Remember that they needed to pay taxes, they needed to give some portion of their work to lords, church, etc. So pretty hard work. They didn't have so much free time. Whereas the nobility, yes. It was the nobility very much that even like in 16th, 17th centuries was consuming mostly this undiluted wine as a regular thing. Not only this, for example, they were making historical analysis of how Swedish nobility was like eating and drinking, and they were consuming like a lot of alcoholic beverages that are very similar to vodka with every meal, really every meal, and in large quantities. And it really had effect on them, how they were behaving, etc. I don't know if you have heard the name Tycho de Brahe, the Tycho de Brahe. Yeah, the Danish like the Danish scientist, and so in the Renaissance. So basically very clever man and everything, man of talent, etc. But in his free time, as it was custom among nobility, he was also drinking a lot. He was drinking so much that even he had like a drinking partner who was an elk. Yes, he had like, moose, yeah, moose. They found a moose and they were giving him alcohol and they were inviting him over to all of the parties. And once the moose got like so drunk that it fell it fell from the staircase and died. And then Tycho de Brahe was like really, really sad about it, writing all his friends like sad letters about how he misses his animal friend that he like made drink to death. Yeah, that was like pretty common. They were also doing this to beers. Swedish kings, mostly they always had some party beer, really, and they were giving them like a lot of alcohol and having fun and stuff, and when they died they were like usually sad. And so yeah, people were doing many crazy things at those parties back then, and it's linked to the fact that they were consuming it on a daily basis. Also, many of the acts that you're reading about in history, of the foolishness of certain nobles or ruling class, it can originate in part from this as well. Because if it becomes the regular basis, it's something different. Well, in Czech Republic, here we had a methanol affair. It was usually with methanol. It's like the poisonous form of ethanol. You drink it a bit, you become blind. You drink it a bit more, you just die. It's just it can be pretty quick. and it's extremely dangerous. Why are people doing this? It's just basically, you know, ethanol is not that expensive, but to make it even less expensive, because every euro is so important, some people were doing it with methanol also. So there was even companies, I think it was like Rudy Drak, the Red Dragon rum, where you could find the methanol, and there were 42 victims, dozens of people in hospitals, and basically it was one of the biggest methanol affairs in the whole world. I was searching for it. There was something similar in India, in the States, in many countries, in Italy as well. But the number of victims and people who were hospitalized was much lower, because it was, for example, you know, some let's say some party, some homemade stuff, but this was really like company poisoning, company selling their regular stuff, products, and many people just died afterwards. So yeah, we were talking about it a lot in the TV. So yeah, this is the sad story of methanol case. Okay, can we? Thank you very much. So nicotine. I don't need to tell you cardiovascular diseases, lung damage and cancer does it cause. An ordinary cigarette contains over 7,000 chemical substances. It's also linked to the fact that the producers, they're taxed, and they also want to make their profit higher and make it more affordable, but at the cost of including so many other things that are completely disastrous to the organism, and we don't do too much about this. 7,000 chemical substances, and more than 70 of them are cancer causing. Doesn't mean, of course, that you will smoke, that you will necessarily get a cancer. There are so many people getting lung cancer without smoking in their lives. But for example, if you're pregnant and you're smoking, then your child can also develop the addiction to smoking much more quickly. Then he will just have more natural predisposition as other effects it can have. So please, like, when you consider pregnancy, it's better not to smoke. But of course, like, the child will be born, and it can already have like some predisposition for this addiction. There are not many studies concerning vaping. Vaping is basically the electronic cigarettes, let's say. You just buy some liquid, put it to the electronic cigarette, and then you are vaping it, because it's like vapors that it creates. It's like it has some kind of aroma. It's not like the basic smell of cigarettes, so that's why it becomes more and more popular among youth. A priori, there's less cancer-causing substances, but there are still. On the other hand, even though there are a priori less substances, it's not like we would prove that it's like for 100% safer and better and everything than cigarettes. It's still theoretical, and we are waiting for more studies that would be made through different periods of time, because like it's still a pretty new phenomenon. What we know for sure from the studies is that people who are putting to their vaporizers THC, and the vaporizers are not specialized for THC. They don't have like, and these vaporizers are pretty rare. If they're not specialized, expensive and everything, if you will put it to normal vaporizer, then the risk of cancer gets really high, and you can really see the correlation, because like the way of how it burns, etc., causes makes it much more dangerous, and you much more likely to really at very young age develop the lung cancer with the THC in normal vaping. Of course, like it depends. The vaping, the fluids have some amount of nicotine, I would need to, I think we have until 14 milligrams. I knew one Lithuanian guy.
I believe it's 18 in Europe.
18? 18? Okay. I knew one guy who, he was from Lithuania, and he put it with salt. It was like homemade stuff, and in order to have higher dosages of nicotine. He had 100. 100. Some people tried it, and you just like smoke a very, very tiny sip, and it's like as if you were smoking for the first time. Like just minuscule one, and you're like really like high on cigarette, let's say.
I actually like know a lot of people who make their own like liquids, like not liquids. I think people call it salts or something. That they
Yes, yes, the salt. Yeah.
yeah, I've talked to a lot of people who actually make that themselves. You know.
Yeah, it's like just it's not like legal, but
But salts are also sold in the shops. It's
Yeah.
less expensive.
but then you can have like your own product, like your own thing. People are like modifying their vaporizers, etc. in many ways. So there's also like the higher nicotine amounts are different. So yeah, keep that in mind. Yes, and nicotine was very now everybody would know that like nicotine is a bad substance. And smoking itself, like the act of smoking, it can cause many troubles. But in the history, it was very often, and not so long time ago, promoted as something very healthy and what you should do, mostly by other companies. Can we have next slide? For example, look at this nice American poster: smoke a fresh cigarette, give your throat vacation. And yeah, with camels it will show you the doctor, I don't know whom, how great it is to smoke, because smoking creates a healthy man. Every man should smoke at least one package of cigarette, like they were saying at the time. And yes, people were believing it pretty much, and it was much later in history that we found out about what are the effects, and they became also widely known, because you know the companies selling them, they had a huge business on keeping this like not so popular. Yes.
It wasn't that only cigarettes were considered healthy. Like I think like the beginning of 20th century, like you would go to a doctor and say, I have a headache. Can do some crack and heroin, and like they would prescribe you.
Sure, we're going to talk about it. It wasn't just
Okay.
it's not just cigarettes. Many other things like yeah, also alcohol was like considered good.
Heroin was like a huge thing, and up until First World War, when people realized like this problem, and like society is nothing in the ditch. But yeah, then they started, then they banned it.
So we can continue with the next slide. Oh, so marijuana. Yeah, cannabis. I think that many of you already have awareness about this one. So it's usually bred for higher THC content, because the THC is like basically the part that creates the psychotropic effects. And yes, in higher doses it can lead to paranoid states. As we were saying many times, it has different effect on everybody, and yes, it can be triggering factors for mental illnesses, schizophrenia. The relation of whether the patient would really normally develop schizophrenia without smoking weed or not are sometimes hard to determine. But we believe that it can make the process just much faster. Okay, so if you have some mental illness predisposition, this can be one of the triggers. And chronically, if you use it very often, it has these side effects that can be observable by some people. For example, the reaction time, it reduces it. long-term use is also manifested by damage to short-term memory, mostly if you're younger, because as you're younger, the centers of your brain, which are responsible also for the reward system, get influenced by a use of not only this substance, but all the substances, like in general, that are addictive and giving you pleasure, can mess up with your reward system, and your reward system then is directly linked to your behavior, to your goals in your lives, to your ambitions, etc., to how you will behave and act in several different situations. So yes, we can say that if you do it younger, you're doing it, more effect it will have on your brain reward center. And that's really, really important when, for example, you'll have children, etc. Of course, there are some kids in Siberia, when they go to school, the parents give them a shot of vodka to become warm, okay? But still, if they do it like every day they go to school, then it's like disastrous for the kid, like with our brain reward systems. Okay, we can continue to one interesting case in the Czech Republic. Basically, there was a case in 2012 where, when they found, well, we were talking about Vietnamese. You heard about from the hospital about some communities of Vietnamese people who were like involved in selling drugs. Very often they are able to do drugs very efficiently, like with a huge production, and destroy the local production. Many of them are also some like making and planting cannabis. And it also happens that some of them come here, and then some people just imprison them or take their documents, etc. They are not able to speak Czech, so they cannot do much. And in this very case of 2012, they even had Vietnamese who was imprisoned behind the walls with cannabis. The only way he was getting food was through a minuscule elevator, when they were just giving him food and water to live. And yeah, he was kept there like a prisoner, basically like a slave. He was just living there. And once the police came there, they found 40 million Czech crowns in the building. And they found this Vietnamese guy. They were like completely confused because the Vietnamese guy didn't speak a word in Czech, but he was obviously very happy that the police is coming. So the police was confused as well, because they were thinking, there will be the one who is responsible for the thing. But no, he was the local slave who now got freed by the police. So yeah, he was obviously happy, and yes, so it's a peculiar case, I would say, but there are many more of these places had like huge cannabis production with slaves, etc., or other forms of forced labor. Okay, we can continue. Okay, one more slide. So we will have Afghanistan. Can we go one slide back still? So, I would like to point out the position of heroin. Look, dependence potential very high, and active to lethal dose ratio is also very significant. So basically heroin is one of those substances that is considered one of the most dangerous to succumb to. And if we speak about heroin, there's one place in the world that is very, very famous because of heroin, and this is Afghanistan. Yes, Afghanistan has a very fascinating history You know, Alexander the Great was in Afghanistan. They were making like Greek kingdoms in Afghanistan. Then they became like Greek Buddhists, and then there were invasions of Mongols, Turks, etc. So it's very fascinating country, very mountainous as well, with different ethnic groups. But the two most predominant one are Dari, Tajiks, basically, who speak Persian, which is similar Persian to the Persian of Iran, but it's like a bit older, but they can still understand each other very much. So the Persians, like Tajiks, Dari, and Pashtuns. Tajiks, Dari, etc. live mostly in urbanized area because Persian was considered as the language of prestige, etc. and still is in many Muslim countries, which were Persianates, had much of the Persian influence. And yes, in the case of Afghanistan, we can find even 90% of the world's heroin production. It's really the world's heroin hub. It's very predominant in this market. When you just say heroin, it's directly linked with Afghanistan. In Afghanistan itself, there are like 3-4 million addicts to heroin, which is a significant number. It also has a relatively infertile soil. As we were saying before, British wanted to plant cotton in Afghanistan to make textile, etc. A bit like, you know, Bangladesh and stuff, textile. But no, they had bad luck. But with opium poppies, yeah, that was growing as crazy because opium poppies don't need such great fertile soil to sprout. So yes, opium poppies were just amazing for this for the economy of drug trade through British Empire. So the mass production, though, was continuing since 1950s. By the way, the country was also occupied by the communists, etc. So there were like many things happening. There was no stability. The Shah needed to escape, etc. Then there were like coup d'etats, etc. So yeah, and it's true that also the sale of heroin helped to fund radical Islamism, like Taliban, etc. during the Soviet and American invasions. Yeah, because as they were trading this substance, which was very expensive, like, well, pretty expensive to other places, then they could get a considerable amount of profit. Let's say that, for example, even now, today, for a regular Afghani farmer, it's 17 times more profitable to grow opium than to grow wheat. Not the wheat like cannabis, but wheat. So 17 times more profit, you imagine, and Afghanistan is not a rich country at all. Now they barely live for survival in some areas, and with this opportunity, yeah, many people would just go for it, use the occasion to have some livable life by making opium. The price for dry opium in 2007 was around $125 per kilogram, or 1 kilogram, and the opium is, of course, then changed into heroin. And 1 kilogram of heroin costs about like $2,000. So we really see that it can be very profitable business, especially for the areas that were controlled by Taliban and that were living by this. Yes.
Because I need to get some perspective. Like, do you know what average dose for like an opium, dry opium would be? Because I'm not sure. Like, if kilograms, it's probably a lot.
No, that's irrelevant.
Is the substance from which you produce the dry opium is like, I don't know, like a flour, and let's say, and heroin is a bread.
Oh.
It's like that.
Yeah, but also you can use like the opium in like there was the pipes, etc. With heroin, you have like the chemical processes, etc. That's like more complex. With opium, you can also use it with the pipes, etc. Like just the opium, but it's still like opium itself is still very, very, very dangerous. In the past, we were using opium, and we are still using some opioids as anesthetics. In some countries, they were using it. And yeah, because like it can relieve the pain. You're just, lying, cannot move. So it's the perfect painkiller. The problem is with this painkiller is that you will become addicted to it. So I think everybody has heard about morphine, for example.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Why isn't morphine considered an anesthetic? Because in the previous slide it was something else.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Okay. And it's like it is it's not an anesthetic.
It's opioid. It's opioid, but these opioids are pain relieving. So morphine is pain relieving. That's why.
Opioid is a big class, and morphine and this all are the subclasses of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So good. It's interesting because even though illegal substances, addictive substances, should be considered like haram in Islam, they are kind of, let's say, they just close their eyes upon that, and it's like okay to have heroin for Taliban. And it creates a very interesting situation in which you, for example, go to the area which is controlled by Taliban, you drink alcohol, and then you can end up in prison. You will get 36 lashes, but really it's very painful, very bad. You feel the pieces of meat, like they are pretty harsh about this. For alcohol, for just drinking alcohol. But yeah, heroin, that's fine. It's just like, that's fine. They will give you a fine, which is like symbolic mostly in the areas that are controlled by Taliban. And it was like pretty okay. Yeah, they had no problem with it. Even though heroin is just objectively much more destructive than alcohol would ever be. So yeah, it's kind of hypocrisy of Taliban. Here, what you see is one famous bridge in Kabul. My friend was telling me about. Do you know how like drug prevention works in Taliban when you have like so many people who are addicted to opioids, and you don't want your son or daughter to be addicted? Any idea?
Maybe taking them to see how people end up.
Yes, taking him to this bridge. As you see, there are like more bridges like this in Kabul, and there are usually people on the bridge staring and having it like I don't know if sort of entertainment or learning or just seeing the bad side of the world. People on the bridge who are not addicts and people under it, and there you can imagine it's just a huge sea of used syringes of heroin addicts, homeless, people with AIDS and other diseases. It's so disastrous. It's like hell on the earth. Police won't even go there. Because if they went there, they can just make a wrong step, and there will be syringe in their like leg, and they could get AIDS as well and die. So police is really afraid of going to these places, as everybody would be afraid to be going. But for the people who are on the bridge, safe distance, and they can watch everything. It's really extreme, as there's tons of drug addicts. It's not like 1-2 homeless. It's tons of drug addicts with syringes, etc. And basically, yes, my Afghani friend told me about this situation. his father also took him to this bridge to see, yeah, if you start doing opiums, you'll end up like this, for sure. So yeah, it's kind of a prevention thing. Let's continue. So now we see the opium poppies and also the last image. There's another drug that becomes popular again in Afghanistan. You can maybe imagine which one. You can try to guess. It's not opium. It's not opioid. It's a different drug. No. Yes, weed. Yeah, weed. Basically, weed was considered in Afghanistan like traditionally the drug of the old people. The old people of the village were usually going to visit to other villages, etc., to see their friends and relatives and stuff. And then the old men were smoking weed together as like rituals. This is a bit coming back to it becomes a new fashion again, and it becomes like more widespread.
Maybe that's good. Instead of.
That's what I would like to ask you, because like it's usually bad to destroy one addiction by another addiction, but yeah, between addiction on weed and addiction on opioids, the difference is colossal. So the difference is like really disastrous, and yeah, in some cases it would be like much better if people there got too used to the habits of the old men again, of the old days, and start doing weed instead of opioids. So yeah, it's kind of considered as a social drug, something like we have like alcohol here. So for them, the social drug is weed, and it's becoming the new fashion. But we will see how will it turn out in Afghanistan. Can we? Okay, another case of South Sudan. Well, I have a friend who was living there for like 6 years. He was an Italian who was like a professional in agriculture, and he was helping the local people to create some agricultural projects, to just have some food that they could grow themselves. So, because you know, humanitarian aids are nice, but on the other hand, if you give somebody the food, you will just feed him for one day. But if you teach him how to hunt, you will feed him for all his life, as we say. So he was participating in such a mission, giving them the necessary equipment they would need, and learning them the techniques for the agriculture. But South Sudan is one of these countries that would be considered a hell on earth. In some cases, like even Afghanistan would be safer than South Sudan, as Afghanistan has like some very populous cities, and still there are people like living there, even though in very bad conditions. But at least they have something to eat. They like there are very many poor people who don't have such good luck. But when it comes to food, it's much worse in South Sudan than it is in Afghanistan. So, shall we? So, basically in South Sudan, it's not that exotic as you might think. They don't have any like really exotic substances. It's basically alcohol and cannabis. But why do I talk about it? It's because they have a special mindset, special mentality, which is very common in some very poor African countries. So their land is infertile for agricultural activity. There's only the south where you can do some agriculture, and in the north they are very like pastoralist. Women have like no rights. Like there's like if you're born as a woman, you're basically a slave of your man. Childrens are like very cheap labor force. If they die, the father doesn't even care. I will just make another one. It's very cruel in this way. Very cruel. Mostly the north. If to our standards, like, let's say, barbaric in the way of seeing children and women. In South, they are more like, they are more similar to us, let's say, with agricultural societies. But with the pastoralist societies and hunting societies, it's different. Also, what is interesting, that in South Sudan, they have, for example, they are divided into tribes. Of course, new tribes. They have like a lot of soldiers with weapons and stuff from old weapons, with old weapons, and you have many like child soldiers, like they are like 15 years old, and they have Kalashnikovs and stuff. Very common to see this. The government is completely corrupt, etc. The soldiers, if you're not like European and you're a local, and you will make a problem with a soldier, he can just kill you on place and nobody will say anything. Like soldiers have like the maximum power. It's like, they will just bury your body somewhere and nothing will happen. Nobody will know about it. That doesn't mean that Europeans are completely safe. For example, when my friend was there was some American who was going there and making analysis in one village. And they had a driver, and basically two of those soldiers were like 15 years old, were like having a conversation in their local language of the tribe. Nobody knew that they knew the language. They had the driver who was local, and he was from a different tribe, but he knew their language. And basically the two soldiers were saying, "Hey, do you see that fat guy? What do you think if we shoot some bullets to his belly? Will it pass through or will it stay there?" And the other one, "I don't know, let's try it." And they went somewhere, probably for guns or something, and the driver was like, no, we have to go. Don't ask the reason, we need to go now. And they just went away. So yeah, it might happen. These are situations, are the daily basis. There's even a tribe where you have tradition. If you want to become adult and be considered an adult part of the tribe, you need to kill somebody and take the proof. And then they were like discovering like caves full of corpses, etc. of this tribe that was like doing this. So yeah, but that's an extreme even for South Sudan. Like many tribes are not like that extreme, but some of them are. What is interesting? I said that there's a problem with food, but guess what? Even though the soil is very infertile, they can have large reserves of sorghum, which could be used as their food. They wouldn't need to have such colossal famines, etc., and they could subsist. For example, when it comes to food, it's usually, the father eats everything. Then if he cannot eat anymore, he leaves something for the wife. And for the children, it's just the things that like small bits that drop on the ground. Like it's that extreme. Especially for the children, like if you survive, you're very lucky. The normal age, the average age is very, very low as people are dying so soon. But the paradox is, even though the land is infertile, there are things that can be planted there, and they are planted there. But instead of making food, they are very often used to produce alcohol, like some beer from sorghum. So this is pretty paradoxical and disastrous, etc. But it has something to do with the mentality, and I'll tell you why. Like normally in South Sudan, you don't see money very often, like almost never. But if you have some, if you manage to get some money, it means it's now or never. You need to spend it immediately. And you need to spend it on, most people spend it on alcohol. So buy this alcohol which is made from sorghum, and it's their kind of daily relief out of this hell they are living in. So yeah, if you have money, they don't have mentality that you will invest the money or do something with the money or keep it or maybe increase it somehow, invest to something, some equipment, anything. No, they don't have this kind of mentality, because they know that once you get money, the chance of you dying is much higher, because now you have money, you have something. You become valuable as a person. So many people could try to kill you, and you need to enjoy the money as you have it right now, today, because today will not repeat itself anymore. So you just go to buy drugs. Many, like, let's say heroin, etc., or meth are hardly disponible. Like, there are some, but it's very, very expensive, and yeah, but people mostly buy just alcohol. So yeah, it's a very sad story. Even though it's just, you know, alcohol can also destroy a whole country, or have an impact really very terrible on a country. Okay, we can go. So next case, China in 19th century. We were already talking about this during the game. Yes, widespread opium epidemic. From the historical sources, we know that it caused famines in the countryside. People were just unable to move, unable to go to the lands and work on the fields. Cultivated in British Indian colonies, that means also like Afghanistan, because it was like what was considered like the India was like much larger. The ban on the sale of opium in China, because the Chinese government knew that the Chinese imperial government knew that opium will cause troubles. They decided to ban it, but yeah, of course, that's something that made British very angry, as they were losing a lot of their profit, and it was a substantial part of the GDP at the time. So they even made wars against China. China didn't stand any chance. Actually, it was this that created Japan. The opium wars created Japan as we know it, as a Western country, because Japanese, like when they saw what happened to China during the 2 opium wars, few British men, like 400, coming and destroying the whole country, occupying everything and stuff. They said to themselves, like, we cannot be like this, and they started industrializing and westernizing the countries while keeping their own traditions somehow and implementing them. And that's why they kind of became one of the powers, whereas China just fell down even more during communism and Mao Zedong. So it's the comparison between 2 countries, which were, like, China was much richer than Japan at the time, but then it just went another way around because of the opiates as well. They had some role in this. Whereas Japan was isolated, so no like trades, etc., no opium, no things like this and stuff. So it's interesting to see this. Okay, so let's see once more, just so you can see that. Look on caffeine, it's like stimulant. Cocaine is also stimulant. There are other drugs and substances like kratom, which are getting popular and are legal. Also, it's stimulant. And I will tell you something that you've never known about, you've never heard about, maybe, but still you know its current form, and I'm sure you drink it sometimes. Can we? So this was the original form. It was called the Vin Mariani. It is a Corsican wine that was made in, well, at the time Corsica was part of France, but they are like speaking Italian dialect, and it's wine that they were combining with cocaine. And like normally, it was in 19th century, second half of the 19th century, and it was really something Yeah, normal, yeah. Let's just combine wine and cocaine. Why not? It was so popular that even His Holiness the Pope writes that he has fully appreciated the beneficent effects of this tonic wine and has forwarded this to Mr. Mariani as a token of his gratitude, a gold medal bearing his, yeah. So, yeah, even the Pope liked the wine with cocaine very much. He enjoyed it, and it became so popular in America. But then something happened in America, something important. Can you guess what?
Prohibition.
Yes, prohibition. The first prohibition, not the Chicago one, Al Capone, etc., but the first prohibitions in 19th century. So, what did it mean? That people couldn't buy this very, very popular wine with cocaine. So, what did they do? No, no,
They started seeking out possibilities to replace it.
They created something that you know, guys. Something which is very popular. I'm sure you know it.
Energetic drinks.
Yes. Coca-Cola! Yes, they created Coca-Cola. Have you ever wondered why in the name they say Coca? And why it's like so similar to cocaine and coca leaves and everything? Have you ever thought about it? Because yes, actually, there was cocaine and caffeine, mixture of them, of these two stimulants, which are which have some kind of similar effects when you see it as a stimulant. Kratom, caffeine, cocaine as stimulant have similar effects, but the degree can like change very, very much. They are stimulating you, giving you the dope, the energy. In America, very often you had like some kind of shopkeeper in the village, etc., or a small town. You just went for your daily dope. Your grandpa just went and bought cola with caffeine and cocaine. And why cola? It's basically, as they loved the wine with cocaine so much, and now they couldn't make it anymore, so they made the lemonade with cocaine. And yeah, that's how the Coca-Cola was created, because it wasn't banned like by the prohibition. So from the Corsican Mariani wine, and yes. On the other hand, people pretty quickly found out, because it was at the end of the 19th century, and just at the beginning of the 20th century, in 1903, they found out that the effects of cocaine in Coca-Cola are like so destructive that this needs to cease. And so from 1903, instead of putting cocaine, they were just using already used coca leaves, some residues of it, which were much, much less strong, much less potent. So yes, since 1903 it wasn't like the pure cocaine in Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola like with coming years was distancing its position from coca leaves, etc. Still on. So yeah, and as it could be easily conserved, etc., it became popular among the soldiers, etc. But this, and that's why we know it even now. So next case is Azores, the island that belonged to Portugal. You can see it here. There's Portugal, then there's Azores, and they had a very particular situation once. So once upon a time, there was a cocaine ship coming from South America and passing nearby these islands, but there was a storm, and the like ship, like it became a ship. There was a shipwreck on one of the islands, concretely on the islands of São Miguel in Azores. But the ship had very huge, really colossal amount of cocaine, and in 2001, like the awareness about it, and especially in the islands which are pretty isolated, weren't so high. Like, what are the bad effects and what it even is? They just know that there was some magical powder that now appeared out of nowhere, and local residents, like, imagine your grandpa, your grandma, going, having a coffee at the breakfast or dinner and taking it with cocaine, with that powder that they found. It was so cheap that when the ship wrecked, there was one bottle of Coca-Cola, like full small bottle of Coca-Cola, full with cocaine, was sold for around 5 euros. 5 euros. Like, imagine how huge profits would everybody else make with this amount, and it was 5 euros. People didn't have awareness about how much it should cost, what is it, etc. And many people, unfortunately, became addicted seriously to cocaine, as they had unlimited, so let's say not supply, but amounts right now, and well, the amounts were becoming scarce and scarce. So yeah, that's another sad story about how drug can destroy the local communities. Okay, so because we are already approaching the coffee break, I would like just to say a few words about meth. So, methamphetamine, maybe you didn't know it. If you paid attention, Mr. In the hospital was speaking about it. It's used mainly in the US, also as in some medicals. Mostly not to cure ADHD, it can be like cured, but to relieve, yes, to improve the condition of people with ADHD. Do you know what is ADHD? Yes, it? Okay, good. So we don't need to say something. Historically, though, it was given to German soldiers during the World War, and because they were thinking that the soldiers on this drug will fight much more effectively, they won't be like scared in the trenches and stuff. But the problem was that basically those people, those soldiers who were like who had to experiment with methamphetamine, became aggressive, mostly towards their own colonels and stuff. They became aggressive, so they kind of really realized very soon that this drug cannot be like used for soldiers. And they became aware of its effects, and it became like illegal pretty quickly. So in Czech Republic, the price for a gram from the distributors can be around 40 euros, and if from the producer himself, basically it's the half, 20 euro per gram. There are much cheaper versions that are mixed with many other things, and there's also glue which is disponible, and these very, very cheap variations of meth were popular even among children in this region at various schools. Mostly, for example, also in the city of Orlova, etc. And I believe we were already talking about meth as well, with Hannah, etc., with your brother, and you were afraid of him like becoming too. So it's a very similar situation. The side effects can create anxiety, confusion, insomnia, mood disturbances, violent behavior. That's why it wasn't used for the soldier anymore. Like, they became too violent just against themselves, and paranoia. So this is about meth. And one more thing I personally didn't even know about. I just found it out when I was like doing this presentation in a high school. Is kratom. It's basically a legal substance in many countries. But even though it's legal, as people didn't know, it's like kind of a new fashion coming from Southeast Asia. It's basically a dangerously addictive stimulant as well. So it is somehow similar to caffeine and cocaine in the way of being a stimulant. Sorry, just ignore this. It's not 40 euros from distributors and stuff. That I just forgot to. That was just about the math. 5 grams are needed for 1 hour of effect. This is just keep in mind this. Was about the previous slide.
Do you eat it or do you like sniff it?
It's a tea.
Yeah, people make a tea. People make a tea, but I think there are many various forms of like how you can digest it and stuff. But yeah, tea is like the most popular one, I would say. 5 grams are needed for 1 hour of effect, and it's a similar stimulant to cocaine, as we said, and it's very popular among people who need some concentration. Young people as well. It was at high school that people were telling me that one guy was like making some trainings and stuff, becoming some sportsman, and he was saying, "What do you think about kratom? That I need to go and take kratom every time before I go to training. Otherwise, I would be unable to do anything." You remember even the story, the folk Thai story, that when the guy has to marry his daughter and he needs to choose between kratom user and cannabis user. So this is something that illustrates the fact that it's stimulant. The one consuming kratom is like more energetic, cannabis is more relaxed, etc. So that's why the truck drivers also, when you're going on a highway, it's night, you really need to go huge distances. You cannot just sleep, have like micro sleep, because you would die. Some of them are taking kratom in order to be more aware, to be like to not fall asleep. Yes, also other professions in which you need high concentration. The bad thing about kratom, unlike coffee, if you drink coffee and then alcohol, like nothing will happen. But hey, if you take kratom and then you will drink alcohol, you can even die. You can even die, especially if you take higher doses of kratom. A higher dose you consume, because 5 grams is just needed for 1 hour effect, but there can be much higher doses that you can take, and which will have like much worse effects, much worse even. But let's say that chronically, even at 5 grams for 1 hour effect, after some time you will just lose your appetite. You can have skin problems. One of the biggest problems is fatigue, because you're just so used to getting this dope that if you don't have it, you're just completely tired. It's fatigue, muscle pain, and the combination with other substances, not only alcohol but many other substances, is pretty dangerous. So yes, that's about kratom, which is like not so known flower. We make the powder and tea, and yeah, many countries legal. That doesn't mean it's completely safe. Many, when you try to buy it or something, like many information will show you these are the bad side effects, and please bear this in mind. So, thank you very much for your attention. Yes.
Thank you for listening to our podcast created for the educational purposes of the Erasmus Plus Youth Exchange per Aspera in Inferi, Unveiling the Roots of Drug Addiction Among Youth, financed by the European Union. We hope you had a chance to learn something new about this intricate topic, and we'll be glad if you share your thoughts and ideas in the comment section below. This was Silesian Society for Solidarity. See you next time!